Okay, so welcome back, everyone. We are at the moment with Antonia and Arash, the two film directors of the two films that we watched. If you stayed and watched the credits also, you will see that they are both involved also in one another's films. So we will also perhaps talk about kind of your collaboration and the work that you've done together. But first, I'd like to start with Antonia and ask about your motivations to go to Rojava. So at the beginning of the film, I mean, you actually tell us this in your voiceover that you saw a news report, you saw Minbij liberated, you saw the women fighters, and the image of the women fighters telling the women in the city that that they're liberated and so forth, and this is how your journey begins. And I guess now that we've watched the film, and our theme is resistance, of course, but we see in the film obviously that there's so much more going on than just a resistance, right? Like there's actually a rebuilding, there's a vision of an alternative, a better society, and there's ideology. So and as a woman and as a feminist, I can imagine kind of the curiosity that there is towards trying to understand what is being done on the ground, one-on-one, but also as a filmmaker, thinking about Western representations of the female fighter, right? There's always kind of I feel like they're a lot of the time depoliticized, and there's always kind of this fascination, yes, with them, but also their political motivations, their ideological motivations are always kind of placed in the secondary motivation maybe, and there's always kind of this emotional push for their actions. So both as a woman and as a feminist and as a filmmaker, can you maybe, in light of this little blurb that I said, talk about your motivations and your journey to Rojava and meeting Hala?
Yeah, sure. So I think in the movie it's a bit like a very shortcut, it's true, I saw the liberation of Minbij in the news in Berlin when it happened in, I think it was 12th of August 2016. But at that moment I already planned to go to Rojava to research for the documentary about the women's revolution, and I had this idea to start an academy. I was really very much interested in the ideology behind and how it's being translated to the society. So I was not so much interested in the fight at the front line and in the female fighters, though I ended up in the police and the military forces, but I was more interested in the transformation and all this what you just mentioned, like the building of an alternative society and all this what Rojava stands for. But at that moment I already saw myself maybe as part of an solidarity movement, and I had been doing researches about the Kurdish struggle or the women's movement and in the Turkish parts of Kurdistan. So I spent, I think it was the summer before, two months in, no, the year before. I'm looking at you because we met there. So I lived in your place. So I did with two friends a movie there about the women's movement in the city of Diyarbakir, Amit, in the time of the city war. Yeah, which was 2015, so 1 year before. But already back then, I knew I want to go to Rojava and see how is how it's working over there. So this was a bit the context. But it's so much true that there was so much fascination and almost exotification. Yeah. I don't know how to say in English, around female Kurdish fighters, which I was somehow aware of, but also at that moment, I didn't know so much. I mean, I myself didn't know the Kurdish language. I was just this curious woman with a lot of questions. I wanted to learn. But I was very much naive, I would say, about many things. And I was super lucky that when I went to Rojava, that I met people who supported me in this process of doing the film, but also of learning myself and understanding the situation much better. And one of them was Arash, who supported me from quite early stage of the production.
Okay, so yeah, maybe since you mentioned it, we can talk about that collaborative aspect, because you mentioned that you didn't speak the language, and we see you working with a translator, or maybe several translators. How was it on the ground when you arrived? I mean, you went to the academy first. And I'll ask about, like how you met Hala and how you managed to get her trust, especially considering all the kind of shame that there is around what it is that she's doing in the society at large, let's say. But how you kind of managed to, gain her trust. But yeah, how was the kind of collaborative aspect of the process?
Yeah.
And was that kind of a reassuring also aspect? Were you worried about certain obstacles, maybe security issues and things like this?
Yeah, so I arrived there alone, like I went alone with my camera, and I didn't know how much I would stay. I thought I would maybe do a month of research and then go back to Germany and return, something like this. And in the first months I met like I did the research about all the women's structures, and then I met Hala in this academy, and had this first conversation with her, which is also in the movie, where we sit in the grass and she's telling that she just ran away from her house.
That's the first time you met Hala?
That's the first time I met her, because I went there and asked, is somebody here from Minbij? And then they brought her to this interview setting. And she agreed on having a conversation in front of the camera. And she was this like, if you stay here, I will tell you my whole story. Super open, like I didn't feel so much this that I needed to break through. She was like literally breaking through me and asking me to stay there. So this was like after the conversation, I decided to stay and continue filming. And at that moment, I had a translator who is also like the translation setting is also visible in the movie. So Hala is Arab, she doesn't speak Kurdish, so we needed a woman translating from her from Kurdish to Arabic, and another woman translating from Kurdish to German, like a German Heval, like a German woman joining the party, like there are many. So with her broken Kurdish, like it's a lot of translation involved. But she needed to leave, and I stayed then alone there, which means at that moment I didn't understand anything anymore. So I just filmed like really like a fly on the wall. It's like this sentence of observational documentary. I was just observing their everyday training and ideological training, and without understanding the word basically. And then in the same time, I met Safinas, who was like a Kurdish filmmaker living in the same city where the academy was, and she agreed on supporting me. So she stepped in the project and always started translating me the material after I shot it. Like I went to her house, and basically her family took me in. I lived there for 1 year in the end in her family, and she always translated the material with me and helped me understanding what I'm actually filming.
That's great. And Arash, at what point did you kind of come in on the project and got involved?
I was working as a journalist in the region, and there is a film commune or film center. It's called Comuna Film Rojava. I was there, I think, April something or May 2017 or so early we started talking or Antonia was showing the material, and we were talking basically about the structure of what can be the film about, or I was in that.
Okay, yeah, so you can tell how you saw like what you saw. What is the challenge of working with me?
It's a bit, I mean, kind of as well cliche about the Westerners, that they go to these underdeveloped countries or whatever, and there is always a up to down look. The problem is not only an ideological or content problem, it's a dramaturgical problem when, especially in documentary, they want to save the world, so they feel so pity for the characters, and we as the audience, we cannot feel anything when the characters are really victims of this. But in this specific context, it will change itself into kind of an ideological withering of that, oh, we should be so much devoted to the narration that is there. So, so often, I mean, at least the political kind of filmmakers that they go there, they reproduce the narration that is there or existing there, but the other non-political, they just narrate what should be listened from the Western, for example, audiences. But anyway, the challenge was to break this, at least to show the other parts that the existing reality could be a bit different, and it was a good opportunity to go to, I don't know, Hala's family or the networks of the people around Hala and in the city, and Antonia was doing that, and it was in this process that she realized this as well herself.
Yeah, as I said, I was interested in the ideology and how this is being translated to, some reality, let's say. And in the beginning, I was so much excited about everything and just seeing like the women's revolution and the glory of the revolution and these things, but didn't understand like the challenges, the contradictions, the political landscape itself. So for this, Arash and Stefanos were extremely helpful to go a bit away from this very idealizing or
the supposed maybe even utopic image that might come out from this idea that, all the women are here, but there are, because even the film, there are all these ups and downs and there is conflict, and it's not so much, it's not like there's not like just this one level to it. As you say, you translate the ideology into daily reality or everyday life. And so you see, what that entails essentially also.
Yeah, and also question certain things maybe, and that's it's a long process.
So I mean, you mentioned like this the Western gaze, and Arash, when you were talking about it, and of course obviously this there's this always from a privileged position going and talking, but I believe that there are other positionalities, of being woman and of being a woman, or being a feminist filmmaker and so forth. When you were at the editing phase, let's say, of the film, or when you were deciding, I guess, on the form of the film, were you? I mean, I know you studied film. Were you concerned with, what a feminist film is supposed to look like? Were you interested in reflecting kind of the revolutionary spirit, let's say, in the film towards the film form? Because essentially you have a very, classical 3-act structure, which is, but in feminist filmmaking, let's say, or documentary filmmaking particularly, there has always been these discussions of what a feminist film should look like, let's say, and which tools they should use and how narrative should be built. And maybe I'm making an assumption by assuming that you wanted to make a feminist film. So first of all, let me ask you if that was your intention, and second of all, how you decided on going with this classical narration.
Yeah. Maybe it's already all, you already answered yourself. So I think we were not so revolutionary in the form. Like we ended up like in a very classic, like as you already said, like it's super classic from the dramaturgy and the voiceover, and even to follow one woman and to like tell all her emotional ups and downs. And I don't know, for me this was in the end what I managed to do in all this super difficult situation. It wasn't easy to shoot in this setting and in this surrounding. And I was not like in this situation where I felt I'm under control things and can like freely develop something. I was like more or less like always an emergency situation and just like trying to follow up and grabbing on, and happy that Hala let me follow her so generously. So this was like the most easy maybe for me to make. Sounds like an excuse, but I think it's really like a part of the truth. Though we were always like thinking, okay, shouldn't we make something like revolutionary? Like, should a movie about the revolution really have just one character, one main character? Shouldn't there be many voices? And like all these questions, you know, like, but then, okay, let's forget about this and just like do what we started. Yeah, I think that's it. I don't know if you want to add something.
I think you said it.
Arash, we will also talk about your film, but maybe I turn to our audience to see if there's any questions. Great, Fulya.
Thank you. So first of all, I would like to thank you because it was one of the most, I think, powerful screening sessions I had. So it was really interesting. Yeah, so we can see like through the movie, I have a question for you, Antonia, mainly. You become really close with Hala. So I would like to know in total how long this process took. Because you live so many things together, you are going to so many different places. And we are also, I mean, confronted to really hard truths. And how did you live that also as a human being through the process, let's say?
Like I filmed with Hala 1 year, and then I returned for like another month. I think something like 13 months. But which means I lived there like completely here in Rojava, and I went like each month for about a week to Minbij to film with her. The rest of the time we spent somewhere else doing other things. Hala was, like, as I said in the beginning, was quite easy. Like, she was super open and super ready, willing to share her story somehow. But she also is this tough, super unpredictable woman who also like create this tough image of herself. So it took quite a while to come beyond this image that she wanted to show from herself, and I think super difficult it was when she came in conflict with her movement, because of course in that moment like everything collapsed and all the self-defense and everything she really truly believed in and built for herself in this year, and her whole career basically collapsed in this moment. But this was nothing that we were like waiting for or expected. It really came completely out of the blue, though we both at that moment were having intense discussions about how we can make this movie not just another propaganda piece, but how we can show the contradictions and the difficulties in this also sometimes quite authoritarian structures. So for that, it of course served its purpose, but for Hala it was a catastrophe. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one question. And are you still in contact with Hala or Sosan, and what they are doing? Do you know? And
Yeah.
And of course, it's been a while since you shot the movie and I presented it, and of course you are like living in Berlin, and like what do you see when you look from Berlin to Syria, like, or these places like Raqqa or Manjib, you know, like as a transformation, or is there a transformation?
So Sosan, shortly after the movie, stopped the contact. Like, she didn't want to be in contact anymore. Like shortly after the marriage, basically. she also quit her work as police, and then she didn't reply anymore. With Hala, we are still in contact. Basically, it's the same situation with her, like in the end of the movie. She didn't return to the movement or the forces, and she also didn't return to her family. She is not married yet, so she's kind of in the same limbo, trying to survive. Minbij was also affected by the earthquake. Luckily not as heavily as other regions, so her house had some cracks, but it didn't collapse. But I think for some weeks they all stayed in camps, like everybody. The situation is a bit devastating, I would say. Like recently, I think since 1.5 year maybe, or a bit longer, like the drone attacks from Turkey really increased. So officially the war is over, but now there are a lot of really targeted executions, which are also, I mean, we, like Safinaz, we just spoke to her like 2 days ago, her neighbor was executed, for example, by drone. So these things are happening all the time, and I think the economic crisis is also like much, much worse than back then. So it's a bit difficult to now talk about what they have built and like all this hope in a situation which is really like devastating, to be honest.
I can just say basically it is encircled by Turkey from Turkey's side, and then the jihadists the other side, and the Barzani is just de facto Turkish regime, whatever. But there is no water, there is no electricity. People have 1-2 hours or really limited time electricity during the day, and $90 per month salary. It's difficult to talk about any building now, and at the same time there is no. The Russians just left because they were busy in Ukraine, so the Turkey just openly took the air, and they are attacking every few days, killing people.
As far as sorry, just a small parenthesis, from what I heard from the news today, now that the elections are coming up in Turkey, I think Erdogan is now open to meeting with Assad, and so potentially like kind of leaving all those occupied places. I mean, not that that's, you know, going to be a better situation when Turkey leaves, but there is, I think, that prospect coming up sometime soon, yeah. Sorry.
Hey, we come back to the movie, because Russia never saved Kurdish. I mean, for me, I see the movie is very revolutionary, deeply revolutionary. It's not like class. I really like it. Why? Because it's showing exactly the meaning of Rojava revolution, which is most about the feminist and how the women struggle in Middle East for whole years. I don't know if, like, for me, I really feel it because it was very deeply. I don't think because I am from Rojava. I think in general, when any women, feminist women, they can really understand, especially when they are talking about stoning women. I don't know for which reason, but for sure it's not right. I think I really feel happy because I watched this movie. I tried to watch it many times. I don't know if it was last year in the Kurdish Film Festival in Berlin, but I miss it. And I am happy today that I am here. I watch it, take it like compliment, because this is true. There was also like many people, they went to Rojava, to Kurdistan. They was like more focusing to like just to show the Rojava or the PKK or the Abdullah Öcalan, the system, the ideology, just like as a fight. But why they are fighting for? So I think you really put the light in perfect. You know, I really appreciate it. And I am happy. I think I'm going to watch it again. I don't know where. I will also tell the friends about this. But I just have like a smaller question. Sorry, but it could be private. You have the right to not answer. It's totally understandable. But when you went to Rojava, I heard that you were there almost 1 year, right? So in this 1 year, I just want to understand more. after you come back to Germany, I don't know if you are like you see yourself as a German person, but I will call you internationalist. So after you came back from Rojava, what did you see? Like, what did you see? Like, there is something missing in Germany for the feminism or about the women's struggle? And thank you a lot. Sorry, a lot of questions.
It's a big, it's a big thank you, first of all, for your comment. It's a big question. Well, like when I came back, like my body came back, but my mind was there. So it was not easy to return and to settle in again and to like reconnect again with like daily life here. But since I'm born here and grew up here, then also went quite fast again that it worked. So it was not like this existential crisis, but it took a while. And I think it's not fair to compare. I like the sentence, but it's so true because it's like, you know, like it's like they're like, of course I went there because I was so fascinated and I learned a lot. And of course there are many, many things which are like super impressive and that the Kurdish women's movement is like let's say like an, how you say, like an example or an, like for like a role model for like many women, for like their militants, how they organize themselves, or like the dedication, how they dedicate themselves for the cause or the struggle. Then there are other things which I don't understand, which are, like, I think, like, for my understanding of a self-determined life, don't work. And I think it's super interesting to have this exchange with internationalists, with the movement. But I think in the beginning they were, like, a bit, like, not so open for these discussions. But I think it changed the more internationalists came, because they let them in, and then they will have this discussion, so they need to deal with them. And I think this is a super interesting dialogue happening. And then we can talk about so many things in detail, but I think like not here, and not online, not like on YouTube.
Maybe a question for Arash and a letter from Raqqa. So, I mean, when I first saw the film, I was like, okay, this is like an autobiographical, like, documentary, you know, this is, you know, and then I looked at the credits and I was like, yes, it's written by, and, you know, by Arash, but the voiceover is someone else. So I don't know if it's a docu-fiction or, you know, an essay film, are there autobiographical elements? So can you perhaps please tell us about this kind of, the world behind the film?
One of the actually, in the ruined places of the war, always there are the remains of the peoples that they were living there as photo albums, as the things. But the letter that is there, I literally found it in a notebook. It was a ruined. It was somewhere else. It was in a place called Shengal. The fact is that with the war and the mechanism of the war was interesting for me, that it doesn't matter which occupying forces is there, and they change quite so often when it's going on. A few months is this group and the other one, gangsters comes and go and so on. Each one of them, they do the same job to clean as much as possible of the people when they are even on the ruined places. So they were really tearing apart the photo albums. They were just burning them. They were all the things that are related to the memories of the people. But it was interesting that how this, as a mechanism, is working with the war, that what we have as human beings for the memory is connected to the places. But when we are displaced, we have somehow the intersubjective level of the memories, but we will be isolated when all the traces will be fade away. So this is what happens in the war, and when they completely demolish the memories of the people and they change it, it's a cut between now and before, and then you create a new narration, a new memory for the places. And this was an interesting part for me, that what will happen to all these memories, basically.
Did you stumble upon this village during doing your journalistic work? How did you connect with this particular space?
I think it doesn't matter where is it exactly, because even it's just not clearly mentioned.
I'm just because you have the space in the title.
Absolutely, the title is a bit like this, but they are in different places even. But the letter or the notebook was in Shingal. It's an Izedi place, and it was quite early, or 1 year or something after the Daesh or ISIS was away, and the city was, out of the ISIS, whatever, so power. But there were still some parts. There were some ongoing clashes. But what was interesting, for example, for me to see it was in a street, when you walk, the doors are marked that they did like this. That, for example, this is a Sunni, this is Shia, this is Izedi, Izedi, Sunni, Shia, whatever. And but in one of them, I just was passing by and I saw this.
Well, yeah, it's visually obviously a very kind of important documentation also of, the realities of war. And yet it's so poetic in the way that it's rendered. So it creates kind of both this sadness of knowing that there is so much loss, but at the same time there's this very powerful other aspect, which is the documentation and the proof of the horror. So it kind of works on both of those levels, even though it's really the poetic aspects with the voiceover and the letter, obviously, that gives the emotion to the film, and it's not just kind of like this raw documentation of that horror. Yeah. Thank you. Maybe one last question in terms of audiences. How have your films been received? Both perhaps particularly in Germany, in the West. I don't know where else you've screened them, but have you had different reactions in relation, varying, let's say, reactions in relation to particular screening contexts?
Yeah, it has been the long movie. It's the first time that we showed the movies together, which I think is super nice. But a letter from Raqqa was a bit in this online festival circle, and there you don't receive any feedback from the audience at all. The other side of the river was shown in first on festivals all over Germany, but then also in many different countries in Europe and in the United States and Mexico and Brazil and Iraq, Kurdistan, Iraq, Baghdad, Bangladesh, as a African continent also in some countries. So it was shown in many places, and I think the most direct feedback from the audience we received in Germany, because we also did a cinema tour and had a lot of discussions which were super interesting, because I was touring with the movie for almost 3 weeks through Germany and having these discussions. And yeah, I was a bit scared to see how will be the that direct feedback. Also, how would be the direct feedback of the Kurdish community and the movement. But this was super interesting, to see how open the discussions were and how some were attacking, some were defending from sides where I really didn't expect this. And how, like, I mean, our concept in the editing to, though it's an emotional, like, classical 3-act storytelling, we try to make it, like, dialectical and opening up, like, scenes that contradict each other and trying to leave as much space for discussion and own thinking and an open end. So I think this really worked, so the discussions were, like, quite intense and interesting, yeah.
By the way, when I said, you know, it's a classical film, I didn't, you know, I meant it like, this is also something very difficult to do. On the contrary, I think since you're such a, like a young filmmaker as well, you know, it's, you know, we always want to like, you know, go beyond, you know, these imposed kind of narrative, classical narratives, like to say, to find new ways or whatever. But, you know, sometimes the best way is, you know, the way, it's always, you know,
it's what it happened.
Yeah.
What can I say? No, but I'm totally aware of it, and we had a lot of discussion.
And Hala, did she see the film?
She watched the film. She was proud. She was proud, and she loved the song.
I'll turn to our audience once more to see if there are any other questions. Okay. If not, I think maybe we can end it here. Thank you all so much for staying and participating in the Q&A. And see you next time. Have a good evening.
Thank you.